What's up, you guys, and welcome back to the channel. I am here with another mom with a fantastic story, Lorinda and Duhar, and I am so excited. We're going to be discussing her book, She Blinked, and you are going to want to stay tuned for this entire story because it's so touching, it's so amazing, and I'm sure that we can all learn something from this story and from this journey. So let's jump right into this. Tell me how you actually came into um, the thought of the name She Blinked.
She Blinked was simple. It was just an unctioning from God, Queen. And first of all, thank you for allowing me to be on your platform and to share my story with your audience. I greatly appreciate that, and I am humbled. But when you ask me, how did She Blink come about? She is the woman, giver of life, sister, mom, nurturer, all of those things, and blinked. So Blink had so many different definitions, but the one that stood out for me was looking through lenses of feigned ignorance, meaning that you don't have it all together, right? There's so many things that we need to learn. And everything can happen in the blink of an eye. Life is going to change. I mean, you can go from bad to worse or good to great in the blink of an eye. You can go from living in the valley to standing on the mountaintop in a blink of the eye. And you have to be ready in whatever situation that is.
That's awesome. That's an awesome way to look at it. Yeah, you're right, because you could be in poverty one minute and blink, and now you're rich. Or
Yes,
you
ma'am.
could be married and one minute blink, you're divorced, or vice versa. And so I like that. I like that analogy of the analogies that you use when you talk about blink, because just at a blink of an eye, anything can change in any direction for any of us. So let's get right into this story. You start telling us a story about your traumatic childhood and the things that happened. Your mom was terribly abused by your dad, and take us a little bit into you. You have a chapter called "Daddy's Home." Um, Take us a little bit into that. What it was like as a child to be in in an abusive environment, and what was that like?
So, one of the things that I would like people to know, because I am a certified grief recovery specialist, and even if you're in an abusive environment, you may not even recognize that as an abusive environment. And so when we're grieving, when we're going through processes like that, we can grieve toxicity. And that's what my environment was. So when you're thinking about daddy's home, I want to paint this picture. Even though I went through so many things with my dad, I love my daddy. He was daddy. He was all that I ever knew. Good, bad, or ugly. That was my dad. But one of the things that I wrote about daddy's home was I remember when my dad had women, and I mean, when I when I say, the song "Daddy was a Rolling Stone, wherever he laid his hat was his home." My daddy was he was the original Mac, or whatever you want to call him, because he had women falling at his feet, but he didn't want to let my mom go. And that's how it always is. I mean, you can have the world right in front of you, but you'll still go and try to find better. And that's what grief will do to us. But I remember, one day my dad came and my mom didn't want to let my dad in the house. And so he kicked in the glass door and ended up cutting his vein. And
Mm,
even though my mom had gone through so many things with this man, and he could have laid there and she could have let him bleed out right there on that floor, she chose to give him grace. She showed to give him mercy. Even though he had put her in the hospital multiple times, she called the ambulance, and by grace of God, they saved his life. But that's what it was like when daddy came home. Most kids, they see their dad coming home and they're running to the door. Daddy's home, daddy's home. Is going to be dinner at the table. It's going to be love and hugs. But every situation is not like that. And so when we understand that every situation is not like that, we need to understand that how we address people that are going through traumatic experiences, it's not going to be the same. The conversations at the table are not going to be the same. My relationship with my parents may have led me to a counselor's couch. So it's not going to be the same as someone who has that loving environment, who is being educated on, you don't put your hands on this person, or the adage of what goes in this house stays in this house needs to die. So those are the things that I talk about when I say daddy's home, because when you think of daddy coming home, you're excited. There's love, there's peace, and there's tranquility in the home, but it's not always that way.
Yeah. You also talk about the store across the street.
Mhm.
In the book, you talk about walking to the store as a child and this old wooden house being there, and you hearing this voice of someone saying, "Come here." But
Mhm.
your instinct begin to kick in, that small still voice. With a lot of times, some of us, we can ignore that voice when that voice is sending a warning or red flag to let us know, listen, this is not the way to go. But you were fortunate enough to listen to the red flag, and you said, I'll be right back. Just let me run home, I'll be right back. And then you go home and you share with your parents what had happened, and you were expecting your dad to protect you, but instead he has a conversation with a man who could have potentially hurt you. How did you overcome that?
So it took a while. And even then, I really didn't know what had transpired, because I'm going to tell you something. If any of my children come to me and tell me that somebody did something to them or had malicious intent towards them, I'm probably going to jail if if my sanity doesn't kick in at that moment. But to be a little kid and go to the person that you are trusting everything with, daddy's supposed to be my protector. You're going to him thinking that he's going to protect you no matter what. And then the big bad wolf, who is trying to get at Little Red Riding Hood, is protected by the protector that's supposed to be protecting you. That'll put you in a bad place. And that can cause you to have some trust issues with not only the men in your family, the men that you could potentially date, men that you're seeing on your job, just people in general. Those are trust issues, because I can't tell you something because you may not protect me. So, even in that situation, I went to my daddy. I say, Daddy, this man tried to get me to come into his house. And so when my daddy is coming, I'm all puffed up, and because my daddy about to get this man. And then they sit on the bench and they start talking. And then there's a familiarity between the two of them. You know this person, and you gave him the benefit of the doubt when this man should be laying on the ground picking up his teeth or walking away in handcuffs. Y'all are having a friendly conversation. And I don't get that. I didn't
Yeah.
feel protected. And that leads me to talk about, how many kids come to their parents and they have that proverbial shack that's standing there that could have ended their life. And they go, you know what, Mom, Dad, this person touched me. Uncle Sam is looking at me wrong, or he's having conversations that make me feel uncomfortable. And they skirt around the issue because it's a tough issue. How do I know that you're telling the truth? How do you know I'm not telling the truth?
Yeah.
Right? So there are so many times that, it goes wrong. And that's why people don't come forward when they've had these situations happen to them, because nobody's going to believe me. And if somebody does believe me, are they going to do something? If you didn't do something this time, how can I trust you to protect me going forward? So that's what happened when, I just remember it, and being a little kid, to have that much wisdom to tell this man that I will be back instead of going in there. It could have
When
ended my whole destiny.
when we look at the statistics of millions of children being traumatized, being molested, being raped, I don't know that we have a system put in place to protect children.
You don't.
Because if something happens to a child, the child goes to the teachers or school, the school automatically gets social workers involved. The social workers automatically go out to the home, see what's going on. Then the child is removed from everything he or she knows and put in a home with strangers where potentially more abuse could happen,
Mhm.
which it does happen a lot of times in foster care, in
Mhm.
respite care. And so, my prayer and my desire as have been a foster mom of over 26 kids in my lifetime. So my prayer and my desire is to see a safety net or something put in place for children who do experience these kind of traumas, because
Mhm.
right now there is no system that is
No.
put in place. You then now talk about becoming a protector to your twin brother and sister. Having faced the traumas that you face, you now turn into a protector. But the thing that struck me and made me just literally want to cry is that you talked about hygiene. You talked about not taking a bath or not paying attention to your hygiene as a girl because you wanted that to be a defense mechanism
Mhm.
in order not to be molested, but it still wasn't a
That was my
defense mechanism.
shield. That was my shield. In my little mind, I was like, you know what? If I don't take a bath, that won't make me desirable. And if I don't brush my teeth, you may not try to get close to me or kiss me. You're going to be turned off. So I need to get so filthy, like I feel inside, so you won't want me. I need to be that undesirable. And then as I think about that, when I got older, I didn't necessarily take care of my hair. I didn't want to wear the best clothes because I can remember having this older man look at me. I couldn't have been more than 12, 13 years old. And he told me I had bedroom eyes. And so I go to a relative and I say, hey, what are bedroom eyes? And they look at me like, where did you hear that from? I said, well, this man told me I had bedroom eyes. But that's as far as the conversation went. You didn't ask me who this man was, where this man was. Has this man ever said this to me before? None of that happened. So I'm thinking, you know what? Bedroom eyes are a good thing.
Yes.
So those are the type of conversations that we need to have with kids. You don't sit on a man's lap. Little boys, you don't sit girls on your laps. If someone says something about this body part, teach them the name of that body part. Don't teach them it's a hoo-hoo diddly or a no-no spot. Because when
Yes.
they're touching those places, they're touching penises and vaginas. And I hate to say it like that, but we don't teach the kid that nobody should touch your penis. Nobody should touch your vagina. We're teaching them all these words. So when somebody touches them there or does something to them there, they don't understand that something wrong is happening, even if it feels wrong and even if it hurts.
And also, I think we're just in an epidemic in this generation because they have access to so much social media, which gives
Yes.
them access to porn. And
Yes.
so often, I'm hearing conversations of 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds talking about oral sex, talking about sex, performing oral sex.
Mhm.
Uh, Snapchat, there are a lot of videos of middle school girls who are performing oral sex, and it's looked at it as the latest and greatest thing. It just brings tears to my eyes to know that this is what we have come to. And because of social media and technology, children have access to so many uh, things as it pertains to sexual things when these are conversations that should be held at home, just as you said, parents should be teaching. I want to ask you something. Um, and a lot of people might not agree with me, but I don't think that everyone who gets pregnant or everyone who can make a baby should be allowed to parent
I'm right
because
there.
unless you have the parenting skills, which many don't. I
Mhm.
think it should be, do we need a parent university? Like you graduate before you and let's do an assessment. Are you an
Mhm.
abuser? Are you a molester? You know,
Mhm.
it, nothing grieves me more when I'm in a Target or any kind of store and you hear moms and they're cursing out their children like
Mhm.
you wouldn't believe. And I'm just like, really? Are you
Mhm.
talking to a child like
Mhm.
that's trauma? And so this is the next generation that's going to take care of us when we are
Mhm.
well and advanced in age. And I'm like, if everybody's traumatized, you
Mhm.
know, what what is it gonna be like when, when I'm 80 years old? And
Mhm.
so you also because of your traumatic experience, you talk about Fantasy Island, and that was a chapter that I really, really loved because
Mhm.
Fantasy Island, that was, a show that came on weekly where people would pay $50,000 to make their
$1,000.
fantasy come true. And I'm like, ooh, we need a Fantasy Island now.
And
It
that
should
was
be
in the 70s.
that was in the 70s. So now it should be $250,000
Right.
for you to come to Fantasy Island. But you talk about escaping Fantasy Island, Gilligan's Island, any kind of island because you were going through that trauma. Um, Help us to understand how people escape that are traumatized.
First of all, I want to go back to something you said. You asked the question, and because I didn't want to glaze over this. You stated that some people should have um, you have to go through a class to have children. The sad reality of that is, do you know that if you go through divorce after you have children, the class is mandatory. But had you had that class prior to, all the trauma that you caused those kids would not exist because you would have been educated. So I didn't want to glaze past that because that's truly important.
Yeah.
Because I'm going through a divorce right now, and to have a kid, I can have kids. That's rewarded.
Mhm.
You get food stamps, you get all of these benefits for being an unwed mother having children. It's rewarded. But I have sons that are 29, 26, and 16. And by the grace of God, I am not a grandmother today, not because I don't want grandchildren, but I told my kids, I said, I need you to travel. I need you to see the world. I need you to get educated. And I need you to get all of your selfishness out of you before you have children. Because Frederick Douglass said it's easier to love a man than to repair. It's easier to love a man than to repair broken men.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing right now. We're repairing broken men and women. But as you go to that, want to go to Fantasy Island now, right? I need escape. I need to get away because I dealt with all this trauma, but I have nowhere to go with it. As a man, I'm told if I cry, if I voice my emotions, then I'm effeminate. So I have nowhere to go with this. But the thing about Fantasy Island is I loved Mr. Rourke and I love Tattoo. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, every time that came on and the humming of that plane come on, and then Mr. Rourke is standing in that window with his white suit looking dapper and Tattoo is ready and he's ringing the bell, the boss, the plane, the plane. And these people in the 70s spending $50,000 for 3 days to have their fantasies come true because there are so many things that they either want to know about their past or learn about their present that they're willing to take their life savings and come to this island. And the one thing that really drew me in about that, because there were so many different episodes, but the one that I loved the most was this young lady. She got burned in a house fire, and she was burned over her face and the majority of her body. And she kept getting in trouble. She had issues and she lost her parents, and she had her actual parole officer, and the parole officer thought she was beautiful. But because she had all these scars and these burns on her, she didn't see her beauty, and she just kept throwing her life away. So, he paid $50,000 because he loved her, and she couldn't receive that love to go to Fantasy Island. Well, she goes to Fantasy Island, and Mr. Rourke tells her that, you know what, we can go ahead and cure you. We can remove all your scars, but it's your heart. If you're not, if the scars on your heart are not corrected, your beautiful face won't matter. And so many times in my life that I got a second chance at a relationship, where I got a second chance on something that I messed up. And because I was so scarred, so stuck in my muck in the inside, I wasn't able to see past my situation to get to what could be. And so many times in life, we want to go to Fantasy Island. We want the car. We want the big house. We want the money. We want the large bank account. But if you haven't fixed the root of all of those issues that caused you to be in poverty, that caused you to have the mindset that you have, even if everything gets fixed, you're still going to live in a impoverished mindset because you have not addressed the root to what that was. And then but at the end of Fantasy Island, people typically went back to their situation and they saw the beauty in it. And that's what I loved about Fantasy Island. It said, this is your current situation. This is what future state should look like. But you had everything within you to make you feel loved, to make you feel whole, to make you feel well. But because you were so focused on your current situation that you couldn't see the possibilities in front of you. So that's why I really loved Fantasy Island. And because I escaped through writing. I escaped through poetry. I escaped through people pleasing, which only hurt me more in the future, because the more you people please, the more gratification you get from people pleasing. The more you're going to do it, the more they're going to use you, and the more useless you feel after you've done people pleasing. So there's so many stories that can come out of some of the sitcoms that we used to watch when we were little. And those valuable lessons aren't necessarily in the social media that the kids are being fed today. It's not in the programs. I mean, we have some really great programs out there that are trying to go back to that, but we skipped so many generations of missing the innocence of childhood and the lessons that come attached with that. So Fantasy Island, if you've never watched Fantasy Island, go on YouTube and check it out, because there were so many life lessons on that. Or you can read my book.
Or you can read the book, and we're going to leave the link in the description. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Nobles. We're going to leave the link in the description. I want you guys to go out and support this book, She Blinked. It is amazing. We're not going to be able to cover everything, but you need to just get the book. It's going to be an awesome read, and I'm sure you're going to learn, especially if you're on the journey of healing, which we should all be on a journey of healing. And that's one of the things that Africa does for me when I first stepped my foot on the soil of Africa, which was over 25 years ago.
Awesome.
It was a journey to heal. And I want to segue into that. We'll get back to the book, and we're going to leave all the stuff in there where you guys got to get this book. But I want to get back to that, because you talk about, your story, your childhood, your dad molesting you, your mom leaving you. She went into the military. She just needed to escape the abuse of what she was going through. You becoming now the protector of the twins, of your brother and sister. How did you start the journey to heal, and how can we all start a journey to heal with whatever trauma that we have been through? Because you still have people who have been through traumatic experiences and they haven't told anyone. It's still a skeleton because they feel it was their fault. Whatever they feel. Tell us how you started your journey to heal, and how others can just get started.
First of all, you know how you were talking about the shack and that small whisper? God has a way of those small whispers turning into something magnificent for you. And he'll use any situation. So, I'm going to tell, and I forgot to tell you about, I remember giving my dad his first Father's Day present. I gave him a card. I was in high school. We were at the Circle K in Bronson, Florida, and it was Father's Day. I had never given my dad a card. But shame on me. I used to go around my daddy to make him feel uncomfortable. I wanted him to feel like I felt. I wanted him to hurt like I hurt. I wanted him to see the shame that I was feeling. So I gave him this Father's Day card, Queen, and he started crying. And in that moment, God started dealing with me. He said, "You always want somebody to forgive you." This is God talking to me. And he says, "But here you are. You're coming around this man to make him feel bad. Do you know what he went through? Do you? Have you ever thought about that? How dare you expect someone to extend you grace and you can't extend him grace?" And God started dealing with me early on that thing. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, but this man hurt me. Why should I extend him grace? Why? He doesn't deserve it. And God was like, but do you deserve it? And I was like, wow, I really didn't. So the more that I started coming around my dad, the more we started building a relationship, the more that we started having real conversations, and the more I started trying to see things from his perspective. Fast forward, I'm working for the world's largest retailer, and we're doing something called one-to-one conversations, where I ran the management training program, and we would go into a room after we've done the week's courses of work, and you would sit and talk to them about their professional development. The problem with that is we spent some time talking about the professional development, but the majority of the time was God revealing some things to me about these people because of my trauma and because their likeness in their spirit, whether it was emotional trauma, physical trauma, or whatever it was. God started showing me that in these people. And I'm having conversations with them about stuff that I shouldn't even know about. And they're coming out the room crying. And I'm like, God, what are you doing? And I started feeling weird too, because I'm like, oh, that's spooky. And I started feeling not right about that thing, but God started dealing with me in that, and that there was a purpose in my pain for me to be able to share my experience with somebody else. And the word says, my people overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the telling of their testimonies, their stories. We're more alike than we're different. So if people can see that you went through this, but you're still alive, and they're understanding that, yes, I am alive, but I went through some dark moments. I wanted to commit suicide, or I started drinking to try to numb my pain. And then it got to a place where, Queen, I used to drink wine. You know, I loved some wine, but it got to a place where God was like, you know what? I'm sick of you with this. He says, I'm not going to let you get drunk. I want you to feel everything. That's how you're going to heal. So I'm sitting with these people and I'm telling them all this stuff. God was ready to reveal those things to them, but he also had to be ready to reveal those things to me in a time that I was ready to receive it, so I can understand that I'm not as good as I thought I was. There are so many broken places in my life that God needs to mend that I can't mend. So I went into the grief recovery specialist program, and then I learned a lot. But while going through that, one of the gentlemen that I was coaching actually went to work. He was a gentle giant, and he had a lot going on in his life, and he had a really mean-spirited boss that was so narcissistic in nature that this gentleman, he was the straw that broke the camel's back, and this man ended up committing suicide. Yeah. And that broke me to my core. And I'm like, well, God, whatever you put inside of me, I need you to work it out so that I can help your people, that I can be of use. So fix whatever it is in me so that I can be available for you to do what you need to do, because I can't run from it, because I tried. Oh my God, I tried. If you would have told me today that I was going to be a grief recovery specialist, or that I was going to get naked in front of the world and share my worst, I'm telling people that I had bad hygiene problems. Who in their right mind wants to do that? Everybody wants to show their fit bodies, their perfect hair, their perfect nails. Nobody wants to show their ugly, but showing that beauty all the time, it does nothing for people. People need to see that you went through some stuff. People need to see that you not just talking about it, or you just didn't write the book about it. You lived what you wrote about, and you survived. And it was because of God's grace. And it was because of God's wisdom. I tell people all the time, I'm not that smart. And I'm healing every single day. And every time I think that I've conquered one battle and gotten healed from something, God says, okay, now it's time for me to show you something else.
So it's layers. It's layers. It's layers of healing. So you started going through the layers of healing. At what point did you know that you wanted to become a grief specialist? And what does a life in a grief specialist look like? Because when when you have lived in a traumatic environment, and now you are dealing with people that have gone through trauma, tell me how that works, how you are able to help those that have gone through what you have gone through. I know I'm asking you multiple questions. I'm just trying to get the right thing. But what does a day in a life of a grief counselor look like? A grief specialist? What does that look like?
Believe it or not, more listening and having yourself available. And the way that I got into becoming a grief recovery specialist is me and my friend she lives in Delaware, Donna Carson Williams. She is founder of Parenting with a Purpose, because she spent the majority of her life in foster care. And she dealt with some trauma in foster care. And so I'm in Florida, she's in Delaware. We're going to do the class together. I'm going to tell you how funny God is. She didn't even end up taking the class. I ended up in Jersey by myself, and actually in Philadelphia by myself, taking this class by myself. And I thought I was the perfect listener. I thought I had it all together. I've coached all these people at the #1 retailer in the world. I got awards for speaking at Barry University. National Coalition of 100 Black Women have recognized me on this. I have arrived. Honey, I got in that grief recovery specialist class, and I'm like blubbering. I'm like, I thought I had it all together, but I don't, right? And so I got all these new tools, and I learned that when someone is grieving, they don't need anybody to fix them. They just need to be heard. They just need to know that you're there. They don't need us to give them we just give them the resources, right? But we don't give them the answers. They have to come to their own conclusions, because they have to own whatever they're going to walk through. So when I went through this class, it was 4 days of intensive training. You could, if you were a smoker of cigarettes, you couldn't smoke cigarettes. If you partaked in the wine, you could not have wine. Whatever your short-term energy relieving benefit was, you could not touch that thing. And so, honey, going through these classes and opening up all this stuff, I wanted some wine, and hard stuff. Let me be honest with you, because I needed to get away from these feelings, because nobody wants to deal with the feelings. No one wants to deal with the emotions. And then I learned about trauma bonding, and that's definitely something I didn't want to do. But the day in the life of someone who is a grief recovery specialist is someone being in your inbox saying, hey, I've been following you and I've been watching your story and you inspire me. Can you tell me how to get better? And you start asking questions. So what do you mean by getting better? So what I'm hearing you say is that you are lost, or you're confused about your next steps. And do you feel angry? And they're like, no, I really don't feel angry. Do you feel hurt? Yeah, I do feel hurt. So what are some of the things that are causing you to feel hurt? When do you feel hurt? And well, I feel hurt when I give my all to someone and they don't reciprocate it. And so when someone doesn't reciprocate what you give out, do you feel used? Do you feel abused? Do you feel neglected? Do you feel taken for granted? Yeah, I kind of feel taken for granted. Okay, so let's dial down in that. Let's peel that back. So what does being taken for granted look like for you? And just having conversations like this, I can't tell you how many times, Queen, that I have been going through some stuff. Every time I'm going through my darkest time, that's when God sends somebody to me. And I'm like, dude, are you really doing this right now? He's like, I need you to get out of your own way, because the life of a grief recovery it's a thing where you have to be a selfless person, because you can be that one person that pulls somebody back from the ledge and helps them fight another day. This is the life of a grief recovery specialist. It's just, sewing into the community and dispelling stereotypes. So for instance, what I learned at the Grief Recovery Institute, so tell me this, if you see somebody crying at a funeral or something, what's the first thing people tend to do? Or if you see somebody crying, period, what do you do?
They send the first thing people say is stop crying.
They'll tell them. Yep,
they'll tell them stop crying. It's going to be okay. They say all kind of stuff. This too shall pass. They don't give people the time to be able to let all of that go. Because I feel like if somebody is crying in loss, or their feelings are hurt, or something has happened to them, let them get it all out. And then when they're able to tell you what's going on, you should just be listening, just like you said. But these things have to be taught, because it has not been taught, especially in our community. Our community is suck it up. It's going to be all right. You're going to get over it. By tomorrow you won't feel it. All different kind of things are said, because people, where we come from, in our community, we come from people that had to be tough, from the slave trade, from them being, sent over to America and packed in there like sardines, and having to, rely on each other for everything, in a small space. And so we've been taught to tough it out, just to be tough. But it's okay to cry. And it's okay for you to cry until you feel like you have gotten it all out. And it's okay for somebody to sit there and allow you to cry and allow you to get it all out, so that we can get to, okay, what's next? How do we begin to heal? And how do we begin to dig up the root of the hurt, so that we can be the best people that we're going to be? Because the reality of it all is that we have all been hurt. And we all might be hurt again, such as life, because everyone is not on the path of growth. Everyone is not on the path of healing. Everyone is not on the path of seeing someone as they see themselves. As you get older, you understand that, and I think you said this, we are all connected. So if you hurt, I hurt. If you succeed, I succeed. And when we start looking at life like that, then we can become better listeners and do less talking and more listen, and allow people to go through the way that they grieve. Everyone grieves differently. Some people are quiet. Some people cry. Some people just want to be alone. They shut off their phones because this is how they're dealing with it. And so everyone grieves differently. But getting back to your question, I know I went way in there, but
that was perfect.
You said, what's the first thing when we see somebody at a funeral, we see somebody cry, we tell them it's going to be okay, or don't cry. I hear that all the time, especially with a child that's crying, they fell down, and that's the first thing a mommy say, oh, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, and so you want them to hold that in, but I think it's healthy to cry.
Absolutely. And one of the first things that we typically do at a funeral or something, we hand somebody a tissue. You know what handing somebody a tissue does? It signals them to stop crying. So all of a sudden they straighten up, and they're like, okay, I'm making you feel uncomfortable, because grief is uncomfortable. Nobody wants to see somebody that they love in pain. No one wants to see somebody that they really care about hurting. So we signal them to stop crying. Well, joy cometh in the morning. Well, joy didn't come this morning because I still woke up hurting. I still woke up with my mom passed away. And you know what? There are so many lessons that we learn about grief, and there are so many spiritual things that we tell people. So, my mom died December 9th. She went on a cruise, and I spoke to her that Wednesday night. Thursday night, nobody can get in touch with her. Friday, when we went to pick her up off the cruise ship, they told us she was dead. And so, yes. So that was an experience for me, because all this time that I now understand the grieving process when you lose somebody like your mom. I've lost my daughter, I've lost a child. So now I lost my daughter and my mom, but each situation was different. With my daughter, I knew she was going to pass away because she was trisomy 18. With my mom, she went on a cruise, and on the 10th, we were supposed to go to my brother's twins' baby shower. So that was a shock for us. And now, I'm planning my mom's funeral, and, I'm getting ready to go to Africa on the 14th for my birthday. Me and my mom were supposed to be sharing a room. So my mom, even though she passed, December 9th, we buried her on the 17th. I'm still walking through that grief process, because right now I'm semi-okay. But when I get into Africa, in our room, what we were supposed to be sharing together, guess what? That grief cycle is going to hit up. It's going to click up a notch, because now I'm in a solitary space where I was supposed to share with my mom, who I look in the mirror and I see every day, because I look exactly like my mom. And so there was so many things that we didn't get to latch down. But the beauty of, grief and stuff, you have memories. Things are not going to bring them back. Getting upset with the next person is not going to bring her back. But I still have to walk through that grief. And so when somebody comes to me in this season as a grief recovery specialist who loses a loved one, I can't tell them, no, I just lost my mom, so I can't talk to you. I have to walk that thing out with them, because I could be the only one that sits there with them in their muck. And we have to understand that every one of us goes through grief differently. My mom has 4 kids, and each of us loved her differently. Mm-hmm. And so all of us are going to deal with grief differently. And we're going to process grief differently. So say that there was you, myself, and another person. And we had an uncle that passed away. You and that uncle had a bond that was like this, right? So your grief is going to be, it could be traumatic and dark, and you don't know what to do, what to say, how to do it, where to go. And then say that me and that person had a love-hate relationship. So I'm going to grieve differently than you're going to grieve, and at a different time frame. I may not even cry at the funeral, whereas you're in boohoo tears. And then the other person, well, they're kind of indifferent, because, I liked them, but, I'm going to miss them when they're gone. But all 3 of us, the same person, same situation, are going to grieve differently. And that's what we need to understand. There is no timeline on grief. And although there are several books written by scholars and people that really have a solid understanding on grief, there are no 2 situations that are the same, even if the same person is involved in our grief journey. So handing people a tissue, telling them that they're in a better place. Well, what if their better place was right here, right now with me? What if that was the case? Grief is uncomfortable, so we just say anything when it happens. The best thing that we can do is say nothing and just say, you know what? And you don't understand what they're going through. So let's make that clear. I can relate to what you're going through. Don't compare losses. And I'm here. I don't know what to say to you at this moment. I don't know if you're angry, if you're mad, if you're sad, if you're hurt, if you're depressed. I'm here when you're ready to talk. If you just need me to sit here and be quiet and listen to you, be quiet. I'm here. Because it doesn't really sink into people until the funeral is over, until everybody's gone about their own lives, that these people are stuck in the grief with nowhere to go. And that's what the day in the life of a grief recovery specialist is for me, is being that silence when somebody needs it.
And I think that you make a great point, and that's the road that I take when I'm close to someone, or I get a call from someone in my mom's organization, or whatever it might be, that says I have a loss.
Hmm.
The first thing I say is, can we pray, or do you feel like praying?
Hmm.
Because a lot of times when somebody have a loss, they really don't feel like doing anything because they're processing it.
Right.
And even though we all like family and friends and people to be around, really, I know for me, I don't really like anybody to be around. Like, it's just like I'm just trying to process what just happened.
Hmm.
And I can't take a lot of talking.
That's
You know
right.
what I'm saying? So I think you said something so vital. If you can just say, I'm here for you. I
Hmm.
think that that's enough said. That's enough said, just to know that you're there for the person who's going through the grief. And then the other thing you said is, grief has no time limit. I've heard statements from people say, well, they should be over that by now. That happened like 3 years ago. I know when my dad died, literally, it took me 10 years to get over it.
Hmm.
He was a prominent pastor, large church. Every time I would step my foot into that building, I would hear his voice. I would
Hmm.
see his face. I would
Hmm.
break down crying. And I had nobody to talk about it to. I didn't have anybody to talk about it to, because I felt like they wouldn't understand what
Hmm.
I was going through.
Right.
Literally, it took me like 10 years before I stopped feeling the heartbreak of losing my dad at the age of 16.
Mm.
You understand? My mom
Yes.
was young, she was only in her 30s. She was young,
Mm.
and so it was something, and I had to figure out healing. I had to figure it out,
Hmm.
because there was nobody to take my hand to say, okay, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, and you should do this. It is now, with me being in and out of Africa, as I started going there as a young girl, but living there for 3 years was when I really started discovering the journey to healing, and not worrying about what other people say, because the world can be so cruel. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
if you're too fat, they say something. If you're too thin, they say something. If you're too dark, they say something. If you're too
Mhm.
light, if you don't have a certain financial status, if you're single, then there's a curse on you.
Right.
If you're married, you probably should be single. It's just all kind of, people have whatever they want to say. But
Hmm.
living in Africa was when I put my feet on the soil, and I
Hmm.
just felt like weights lifting off of me, and I felt a renewing of mind,
Wow.
to know that I've come from such a strong ancestral background, that anything was possible, and they had to work through all of the trauma that they experienced, and some of them still came out on top. So it is possible. But
Hmm.
you do yourself a justice, and those around you, when you recognize that anger is not the way.
Yeah.
Being vindictive is not the way. Pulling others down is not the way. When I see those kinds of behaviors, I know that that person has not started a journey of healing. Neither have they started a journey of personal development.
Hmm.
And I think that's really, really big in the Christian arena. We're spiritually developed, but
Hmm.
we're soul developed, impoverished.
Right.
We don't develop the soul, the mind, the will, the emotions, taking that time to heal, to meditate, and to look yourself in the mirror and say, you're mean, you're
Mm-hmm.
nasty, you're
Mm-hmm.
vindictive, you're jealous. You're
Mm-hmm.
jealous of people for no reason. Why? And the more I know with my daughter, I'm working with her on personal development and discovering her purpose. Because
Yes.
when we discover purpose, we're so busy with that. I really don't have time to be jealous. I really don't have time to be competitive. When you gave me this book, I was like leaping with joy that one of my sisters was so kind that she blessed me with her story. I was honored. I'm always honored when someone gives me something or when someone shares something with me. I think we have really gotten away from honoring people,
Yes, ma'am.
being appreciative to what they bring to the table in a positive manner.
Mm-hmm.
So you gave me this book. I felt so blessed. And I was blessed when I sat down and began to read chapter by chapter by chapter how transparent you were with your life. And this book is going to help so many that are suffering in silence. And I want to say to you that if you are suffering in silence, then you should be able to reach out to someone who can help you with whatever you're suffering with, or put it in a book. Contact me and let's do a live together. Let's let me get you on the podcast so that we can talk about it. But thank you for sharing your story with the world. And you guys need to get on Amazon, uh, Barnes and Nobles. We're gonna leave it, but you need to get this book, read it, learn from it. I think you should add a worksheet to it. That would be good.
I have a program called You're Not Stuck, and it just speaks to grief and trauma. And but the next book that I'm writing right now, I'm getting ready to release another one. It'll be out shortly. We're just tweaking the cover. It's called The Making of the Butterfly, and it actually deals with grief. And the thing that got me, Queen, is when my publisher read the book and she was doing the edit, she goes, "My God, Lorinda," she says, "do you realize you just wrote your whole season that you're walking through right now, pre-wrote it?"
Mm.
And I was like, my God. So the next book that I'm writing, it's called Fat, Ugly, and Nearly Dead. And it's based on grief. And it's based on the behaviors that we see that we need to correct when someone dies. Because, my thing is certain behaviors I thought would have passed on with my mom, unfortunately, because there were some generational curses there. But because those curses are sown deep into the ground, those things have to be uprooted. And the people that are involved have to do the work and get the healing done in order for that to really die. And it
Mm.
doesn't always. So that's what God gave me with this next book, is addressing grief. And people think grief is only death. Grief is any unaccounted for loss that you have not dealt with. You can
Mm.
grieve a toxic relationship. You can grieve someone touching you inappropriately. You can grieve alcohol, gambling, and all of these other things. You can have children that are in a military family and the child moves from house to house, city to city, and they never get a connection. You can grieve that. I can go over to a friend's house and their parents are so loving and kind and they're having conversation and they're having game night. And if I don't see that at home, I grieve not having that experience. So we need to understand what grief truly is and understand that we're all a nation of grievers. And what I want to do, Queen, just to remember, just so I don't forget this, I want to sow 5 books into your ministry, 1,000 moms. And for anyone that sows into 1,000 moms, those are the 5 that I want you to bless with a book.
Thank you
So,
so much.
yes, ma'am. So I'll need your address to go ahead and get those shipped out to you. But I think it's really important. It's just something that I've given away more books than I potentially sold, because if I go to an Airbnb, if I go to a hotel, I fill out, I autograph the book, and I just leave it there because somebody's going to need it. And I used to go through tolls and I give somebody a book at the toll because God said this thing is bigger than me. I don't need to be known. His people need to be healthy, happy, and whole. And if he's going to use me, the conduit, to get these people to where he can get their attention, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what a lot of us need to do in the church. We need to pick that up. We need to stop doing all these great concerts because they can come and praise God and feel good in that moment. But what happens when we break something off them? Now they got to go home and deal with it. Let's give people resources. And we're going to win in the end. We're going to win in the end. But I just wanted to throw that out there because I do want to bless some of your readers with some books. And I want to bless the ones that sow into you and 1,000 Moms, because I think that's an amazing organization.
Thank you so much. You are such a jewel. I'm speechless with that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Moms, wow, you're going to get blessed with some books. Yay! I'm super excited about that. And I can't wait to read it because your books are really good. You are truly a writer, and God has really, really blessed you with that skill. In wrapping up, you said that you are going through a divorce. Would you say that it is because of the trauma you faced, or not so much that, but how did it affect your marriage in any way?
So, the trauma, it did and it didn't. It did because the root of the things that I was dealing with when it came to trust, relationships, and not listening to the small whispers that God gave me, God actually sent a friend to me before I got married that said, wait, don't do it. And because we were expecting a child, I did it. And so many times we can shame someone into doing something. I was like, well, I don't have the baby now, we might as well go ahead and get unequally yoked. So, but there was so many things that we need fathers in homes. We need good fathers in homes. Yeah. We need fathers having conversations with their daughters saying, this is what you put up. This is what you are expected as a wife. This is what you expect in a husband. This is the things that you don't let a man do to you. These are the things that you expect. We need that. We need the bond of family as an entire unit back in the homes. Yeah. And if I had that, if I had some really great role models, and it's sad to say, my dad wasn't the only one that molested me. But if I had better relationships, there was some things that I wouldn't tolerate. There was some places that I would have been more soft than I was. And now going to this marriage and getting the divorce, I'm not getting the divorce because everything was broken. I'm getting the divorce because this man cannot walk with me where God is taking me. When you want to fight God, I cannot be with a man that's going to fight God, because that's a battle that we can't win. And I know there are some women in the Bible that, sat with that man and leaned on that wisdom and trusted God through this thing. And God killed that man or did whatever he needed to do to move that man out of that place. But in this situation, God clearly told me it was a no. So he allowed, because God is a gentleman, he allowed me to walk through the things that I did. The devil don't do everything. Some of it is our outright disobedience to God. In this marriage was part of my outright disobedience to God. Yes, there were some trauma-bound things that kept me bound to a man that I should not have been tethered to. But when I understood my place in God and my purpose, then I understood where I needed to go with this. and then being honest and truthful with him the entire journey, letting him know that it's not, it really isn't you as much as it is me dealing with me and healing. I've done the work to heal. I've asked you to go to counseling. I wanted to go to church and do different things, but you're not willing to take that journey. And where God is taking me, unfortunately, he's not going. And God showed me that in the beginning, but I was disobedient.
Yeah. So it was your decision that put you on that journey that
Yes,
shouldn't have
ma'am.
happened in the first place.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
know, I think that we have all been there before,
Mhm.
especially as a Christian woman. You want to be married, you don't want to be in sin, you want to do the right thing. But a no is a no,
Yes,
is a
ma'am.
no, is a
Is a no.
no. And it's okay for it to be a no, knowing that God sees ahead of us and He
Mhm.
knows the plan that He has for us. Listen, this has been a interesting conversation. I want you guys again to go and get this book, She Blinked, and look out for all of her books. It seems like there are books coming,
Yes,
multiple books coming. I want you to go and support her, read the books, and see how it can help you, because certainly it helped me just with you sharing your story. And again, we say thank you so much for sharing your story with the world. Many people are going to be blessed from this. Listen, we're going to put everything in the description. You guys go out and support her. And we have another video linked right here. You can just go ahead and click that and see our next interview with our moms. Listen, I am Her Majesty Queen Favor, and I wish you all blessings, and I'll see you the next time.